Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7 by 7. So from time to time, folks have talked about the fact that both Marvel and Lucasfilm are underneath the Disney umbrella, and that potentially Lucasfilm had things that it could learn from Marvel in terms of its movie releases and the way that it builds up individual movies into one big blockbuster like Marvel did with the 5 movies. Yes, there were 5 of them before they got to the first Avengers movie. That would have been the 6th one. And I've been thinking about this a lot, especially in light of the news about the standalone movies and the rumors about them shutting things down and that sort of thing. And so, it occurred to me that maybe, just maybe, there was a possibility that the Han Solo movie, Solo: A Star Wars Story, was going to be the first shot in building up to a big Star Wars Underworld blockbuster. Now, stay with me. Here's where the logic for this goes. First of all, when you look at the list of movies that Marvel did before they got to the Avengers, it's Iron Man, then it's the Incredible Hulk, the Ed Norton Incredible Hulk, then it's Thor, then it's Iron Man 2, then it's Captain America, the first Avenger, and then we get to the Avengers. It was 4 years from the release of the original Iron Man to the release of the Avengers, and then, of course, multiple years prior to the release of Iron Man in the development of that movie and also getting the other movies in development in the works too. And it always occurs to me how crazy an idea this was, to say, hey, we're going to build up to an Avengers thing and we're going to put all these building blocks in place, and how risky it is, what a house of cards it is that you're trying to build, because if one of them doesn't work, then maybe the whole enterprise doesn't work, and this thing that you've been trying to build to, this Avengers movie you've been hoping to get to, it just can't happen because you can't build the foundation because the blocks under it haven't worked. Now, it turned out that Marvel was able to recover from a situation like that because the Incredible Hulk movie did not go over so well. And in fact, there was a very public feud between Marvel and Ed Norton, who played the Incredible Hulk in that movie. And he was initially in negotiations to appear in the Avengers. And then there was a public statement saying that basically Ed Norton was not a very good guy to work with. And Ed Norton's people replied and said they had no idea why Marvel was being so nasty and everything was negotiating fine until suddenly they said, no, we don't want to work with you. So it was a weird situation to say the least, but it was a very public break between Marvel and Ed Norton, and eventually, of course, they announced Mark Ruffalo to replace him as Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, in the Avengers. Now, how does this factor into the idea of a Star Wars Underworld movie? Well, here's my thinking on the subject. First of all, Solo: A Star Wars Story introduced a number of elements that are worth building upon, including the appearance of Maul, right, the former Darth Maul, and now he is a leader of a criminal gangster syndicate, so there's an Underworld connection right there, and people have been lobbying for a Maul movie for some time now, so there's definitely some energy behind that idea. However, there's been no rumor, no speculation, circulation, anything about it actually being in the works or anything like that. So that's comparatively one of the more unlikely pieces of this puzzle, but still an interesting one. So let's get to something slightly more likely, which is an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie. It's only been 2 different outlets that have reported their own sources saying that Stephen Daldry was connected to the idea of an Obi-Wan movie being developed, but I mean, that's still pretty flimsy stuff. And yet, it's worth noting because in the new comics that they're doing, Obi-Wan Kenobi is described as being a thorn in Jabba the Hutt's side while he's in his time in the desert. While he's supposed to be laying low and watching over Luke Skywalker, he is unfortunately forced into action by the fact that Jabba has instigated this incredible water tax, which is an awful thing, and unfortunately, being able to protect the Lars family and Luke Skywalker also involves having to get involved in this thing, and he ends up returning a whole bunch of water to a whole bunch of farmers, and that makes Jabba crazy and whatnot. So there is a connection there, and of course, in Solo: A Star Wars Story, we get a very veiled but pretty obvious reference to Jabba the Hutt when there's that thing about a job and gangster on Tatooine and all that stuff. Well, yeah, that's got to be a Jabba situation, right? And then you bring in the reports of a Boba Fett movie. And as far as these things go, this is probably the most likely piece of the puzzle because of the multiple outlets reporting from multiple anonymous sources. Hopefully they're not all quoting the same source, but that James Mangold and Simon Kinberg are supposedly developing a Boba Fett movie, and this has been talked about for a while, all the way back to Celebration Anaheim in 2015 when Josh Trank was supposed to appear there and could potentially have started talking about a Boba Fett movie before he was subsequently removed from the project, unfortunately. So Boba Fett and Obi-Wan and Solo and the appearance of Maul, so already something's forming. And then with the reports of standalone movies being quote unquote put on hold and making StarWars.net digging into it deeper and hearing from a source at Pinewood Studios that a movie that had been scheduled for time at Pinewood had been put on hold. And even though this is a working title, not even a working title, but this is just a title that Making Star Wars gave it just to give you conceptually an idea of what it might have been about. A Mos Eisley spaceport, a Star Wars story kind of movie. Something that would have taken place on Tatooine, and who knows who could have been involved in it, but chances are scoundrels would have been involved. And again, Obi-Wan's on Tatooine. So yeah, all the elements are there for doing a series of movies that are driven by individual characters that could have built up into a blockbuster Star Wars Underworld movie. And that doesn't even factor in Lando, who everybody loved from Solo: A Star Wars Story. So, there's a lot of folks calling for Donald Glover to get his own movie and so on and so forth. And in the meantime, Alden Ehrenreich is signed for 2 more movies. So yeah, I think there is definitely ample reason to consider the possibility that maybe Lucasfilm was actually considering and may still be considering building up to a giant Star Wars Underworld extravaganza. And if that's the case, then just one voice here, but I'm hoping that if they have to treat Solo like it was the Incredible Hulk movie and just say, hey, all right, one of these pieces didn't work, but we're going to keep building the rest of them and see if we can make this, House of Cards stand up, then hey, I'd say Lucasfilm, go for it, man. Although, I wouldn't necessarily kick out Alden Ehrenreich because I thought he did a fine job as Solo myself. So don't give him the Ed Norton treatment unless he's been really awful in the background, which I don't get the idea he has. But anyway, that is going to do it for the show today. I'd love to hear what you think about this idea, so chime in with a comment. And I'm going to do Last Jedi Trivia over on the audio version of this show at sw7x7.com/iTunes or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. But for now, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.